you see different parts of MSAP emphasized at different times. What we have really been trying to do, myself in leading it, as well as with our new administration, is to really get back to the purpose of MSAP and to the congressional intent, which is really to focus on desegregation and using magnets as a strategy to do that, and building equitable opportunities both within and across schools as well as across districts. So you'll hear me say that quite a lot. The legislation, therefore, is really important. I believe in the chat we have the links to the legislation. We do have regulations that are specific to MSAP. They are somewhat redundant, but they are also add a little bit of detail that can be helpful. And then I certainly recommend looking at past notices and other webinars and so on that we've provided over time. So my goal is to introduce you to the application process generally and to let you know what we already know. Some things we don't know because they do shift. But in the end, what we are really interested in is what your plan is, what your goal is to desegregate, and how you want to use magnets as a strategy to help your district accomplish that. Desegregate and provide equity to all students. So what our peer reviewers are doing when you submit your application is really helping us to look through your plan to know how solid it is, how much you've thought through each of the different pieces to enable your goals to be successful, and then how you are going to evaluate that. Our peer reviewers are really helping us look for the best bets for investing federal funds. So that's what I'm hoping you are thinking about, is how to create a really solid plan, and then to, and not just a desegregation plan, but a plan for accomplishing the goals within that desegregation plan. And then to show us through the various components of the application, or show our peer reviewers really why your plan is going to be effective. Next slide. So this is normally what we talk about when we give an overview of the Magnet School program. It's authorized as Title IV, Part D of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as it was amended recently, 2016, I guess, for ESSA. And the code there is 20 USC 7231 to 7231J. So it has about 7 different parts. I am going to walk through the legislation so that you know kind of what's in it and what we're doing at a federal level to try and meet those goals. When we talk about this program, we usually talk about the purpose as being sort of twofold, and I did that a little bit already. The elimination, reduction, or prevention of minority group isolation in elementary and secondary schools with substantial portions of minority students. I want to focus on that for a second. This part can really trip people up, talking about minority group isolation and identifying what is minority group isolation, because it's really left up to districts in a lot of ways to define in your own context what is minority group isolation relative to the district, relative to the districts around you. Again, it's specifically what the goals of your desegregation plan are to address minority group isolation, and then in schools with substantial proportions of minority students. So really thinking about, what does substantial mean in this school, in this context? It doesn't necessarily have to be the magnet school in which you are trying to address minority group isolation. It could be in feeder schools, but that the emphasis should be on minority group isolation, that a particular group is isolated or in very large proportions relative to your context, and that there are a substantial number of minority students in that school. So those are things that we're going to be looking for. As I said, it's also to provide all students with the opportunity to meet challenging and academic content and student achievement standards. So it's both an issue of access to schools, ensuring that all kids have access to diverse learning environments, but also that they have access to challenging academic content and the ability to achieve their goals. The eligible, what we call eligible entities for this grant are LEAs, districts, local education agencies, or consortia of LEAs implementing an approved desegregation plan, which is either court-ordered or voluntary. A couple important things to note about this. When we say local education agency, that is districts primarily. That is what we mean by that. There are charter schools that are considered LEAs for the purpose of grants in their own states. And that is a state level issue. It depends. And then there are educational service centers or regional groups that are that can be LEAs. So there are other applicants besides districts, but the idea is that it is at that sort of local level where you are trying to think about desegregation and perhaps working with other local entities to be able to do that. The other part of that that's emphasized here is the approved desegregation plan. So part of what I want to emphasize is you do have to have a desegregation plan in order to be eligible for this program. And I cannot speak a whole lot to the desegregation plan and what needs to be, what you should include in that. I'm really glad that they'll be going over this from, from examples of grantees and what you have, what we've already seen. Our Office of Civil Rights is also very happy to help. This is a piece that they'll really scrutinize and look at. We don't want the idea that has to be, so, and those plans can be court ordered or they can be voluntary, and most at this point are voluntary. So these are districts that are interested in addressing the diversity of their schools and are creating a plan to be able to achieve that diversity. It takes time to create a desegregation plan. It does have to be approved by the school board. So we know that that process takes some time. So again, I'm really glad that you guys are starting to think about this now. The approved part is for funding. So as part of the application process, the plan doesn't have to be approved by the department in some way. We will ensure that when we are reviewing the highest scoring applicants for funding, that we are reviewing plans then to ensure that we can consider them approved. Part of that approval is school board approval, though, that it needs to be approved by the school board. So I hope I'm helping clarify that a little bit. We just really don't want the idea of needing to have a desegregation plan be a barrier. We want it to be an important step in the process. We don't want folks to think that there's some other process that you have to do in addition to applying to get an approved desegregation plan. You do need the plan, it's part of the application, but it's there's not a separate approval process from the application process. Next slide. I do, however, want to come back to, so I said that's how we normally talk about this program, the authorization, the sort of those two main purpose. What I am trying to get back to is the statutory purpose, that the purpose of this part, and this is taken directly from the legislation. It's section 4401B of so Title IV, Part D. The second piece of it is the purpose. And what it says is the purpose of this part is to assist in the desegregation of schools served by local education agencies by providing financial assistance to eligible local educational agencies for 6 different things. Those 6 different things, in order to desegregate, are eliminating, reducing, or preventing minority group isolation. So it is incredibly important, that piece. Systemic reforms and providing all students the opportunity to meet challenging state academic standards. So again, that equity, providing all students that opportunity. Innovative educational methods and practices that promote diversity and increase choices in public educational programs. So these really cool magnet schools that offer students and parents opportunities that they might not have in other places. They're innovative and they provide choice. That is an incredibly important part of this. So just on improving capacity to continue operating magnet schools at a high performance level. Again, a big part of this is about strengthening the district's capacity so, like I said, supporting LEAs to be able to do this work. And finally, the last piece is around a high quality education. So it really is giving you 4 or 5 different pieces that are important here that we want to see in every plan. I could speak more to MGI and minority group isolation. I think I did a little bit. But again, at the end of the day, what we're looking for, we really want to challenge applicants to have a clear, coherent plan that takes into account the district goals for desegregation, looks at magnets as a strategy, and makes the argument for why these are schools that are capable of drawing a diverse group of students, how you will know that, how you will be strategic in recruiting and enrolling, how you're ensuring that students can access the school, that they have the information that they need, and how you know that you'll be successful. So thinking about logic models, objectives, evaluation plans, and those kinds of things. Let's move on. The rest of the legislation walks through the different pieces that you'll see in the application. So it talks about the eligibility, the application requirements, and I do want to specifically point out that Congress has included a role for our Office of Civil Rights. They have to review to ensure that the districts that receive awards are able to implement your civil rights assurances. And so that happens through every funding cycle. So you will have interaction with our Office of Civil Rights. They are very nice people and are very eager to help. You'll talk about priorities. There are 4 that are in the statute. There's the use of funds, and I have another slide that has all of the uses of funds, but that's really telling you how Congress thinks you're going to use those funds, how you are allowed to use them, along with other pieces. And then there's a set of limitations. So you'll see the total award that's available, and there is a specific limitation on planning funds that is for the first year, you can use up to 50% of the funds for planning. And then in the second and third year, it's 15%. Next slide. Going to those allowable costs. It's a long list here of things that you can do. I do want to note that acquisition of books, material, and equipment, and compensation of teachers and instructional staff must be aligned to meeting state standards. And so that's something that we're looking for in the use of funds, that we can make that clear alignment between how you plan to use equipment. And in magnet schools, you've got a lot of really cool equipment. How is that going to help students in their learning process is part of what Congress has asked us to do. There's a piece about partial magnet schools and how being able to make things available to non-magnet students. We really do encourage whole school magnets just because they are shown to be more effective in desegregation, as well as equity issues. And then I do want to note transportation of students, because this is an unusual part of this program where you are allowed to use funds for transportation. And we think it's really important to think through the access issues. Just again, personally as a parent, this has been an issue for us to think about how we're going to get our child to the magnet school. But there are some caveats that it has to not be a substantial part of the budget, and it has to be sustained by the district. So we're going to ask you in the application to speak to both parts of that. How is this not going to dominate the budget and sort of use up all the funds? And also how do you plan to sustain this after the grant is over? Next slide. There were a few changes with ESSA in addition to the transportation piece that I mentioned. Grant periods are now up to 5 years. They were formerly 3 years, and up to $15 million over 5 years. I have to say, $15 million is really substantial for a program at Ed, and does seem like it's allowed grantees to be able to do a lot of what they want to do. So it's exciting to see that opportunity. There's also, as Todd alluded to, there's a big emphasis on evidence. And we think about that in two ways, both the evidence for why you are doing what you are doing, the program design, why is it designed the way it is? And that's a priority that we have, as well as the evidence that you hope to gain through this process at a promising level that can help build the capacity of your district to sustain these schools. So what can you learn by implementing this program that you can then use in other parts of your district or beyond the grant period? Next slide. The NIA is the notice inviting application tells you everything that you need to know about the application, and is we cannot ask you for anything that we have not put in the notice. However, it is a government document and it can be a little bit hard to read and put kind of back together because each piece of it is in a different place. We will also have an application booklet essentially that will tell you where to find what you need, how to respond most effectively to the different components. But to what you want to look for in the NIA are all of the different pieces. So in the background, we're telling you what our thinking is, why we put in new things that we put in, why we're emphasizing particular aspects or not. So it's kind of the thinking that goes into designing the application. We have a section on priorities. Again, I'll talk more about those, but it describes the competitive priorities and the points in their descriptions. There are a lot of definitions. Anything that we can give you the legal definition for what we mean by it, we will. In terms of eligibility, it will outline a lot more of those requirements around desegregation plans. It will tell you how we're going to review the plan, and this is really important. It includes the selection criteria. These are the components that we ask peer reviewers to judge applications against. Do they address these points in this way, these components in this way? They cannot give points or score a grant based on anything other than those selection criteria. So you really want to think about those as you are explaining your program. How does it meet those selection criteria? And then there's a piece on award information. If you do get the award, what are some of the requirements? And it includes the reporting requirements. On the next slide, I talk about the GEPRA indicators. These are the program performance indicators, Government Performance Results Act. And this is how the government is judging the collective success of the program. So we have to upload all of the information from each individual grant to say, here's how the program is doing and meeting these goals. What's helpful about this is that it tells you, how we collectively are being judged, what Congress wants to know about how we're doing. And it really emphasizes the MGI, the improvement in proficiency in academics, both reading and math. It also talks about the percentage of magnet schools that are still operating 3 years later because of that capacity piece that we talked about, and the percentage of magnet schools that are continuing to meet academic objectives. So these are really our goals for this program. You will have individual project goals, and that's something I think you'll be talking about through the workshop to tell you, are you meeting what you set out to do? We are encouraging folks to really think about what are process goals, what are ways that you can judge whether or not you are implementing your program the way that you want to, and also what are outcome performance objectives. How will you know that you are successful? And we look at both reports on the GEPRA indicators as well as project objectives when we think about, is this a grantee that is making progress and in moving forward? So next slide. I am coming to the end and I know I'm a few minutes over here. So just in short, the NIA is complicated. It lays out everything, but not necessarily in order. There will also be an application package. I really want to encourage you to, as you're thinking, to not think about how am I going to meet the department's interests, but what do we need to do and how does that meet what the government is talking about? Because it's really in the end about what you're doing in your own community that matters. I encourage you to learn more. This is an amazing opportunity to talk with people who have done it. I encourage you to review past applications. We will do applicant webinars when we release the application, and you're always welcome to email or call us at msap.team@ed.gov. I'm sorry, I didn't include that there. And then on this last page here, just some other resources that I really recommend you take a look at. We do have a grants website, and there's a very good overview of grant making and what we are doing. So I encourage you to take a look at that. The way that we can ensure that these applications do get impacted by the administration that's in charge is often through these secretaries' proposed priorities. These closed a couple days ago in the Federal Register and will become regulation at some point. And I really encourage you to take a look at those just to have a sense of where this administration is coming from, what some of their concerns and interests are. I'll be going over them during the competitive priority component as well. Our equity assistance centers can help districts and primarily districts in thinking about equity. They can't necessarily help you in your application, but they can help you if you are having a difficult desegregation equity related issue. They can help you think about how to plan around those and come up with strategies that perhaps you want to include in your plan. They also have a lot of knowledge. Our TA Center has a lot of terrific, this is funded by us. They have a lot of terrific technical assistance materials. And once applications are awarded, we do provide a lot of technical assistance around, again, the logic of the program, the specific performance objectives that you're going to use, how you're going to implement this, thinking about program implementation plans and then evaluations. So we will provide a lot of that after the fact, but they have a lot of good resources, including a terrific toolkit that I'll put in the chat in a few minutes. That's a development framework for magnet schools, something to look at. Of course, Magnet Schools of America, and then past grantees. I do provide a link to our awards. Our website, I will say, is not as up to date as it could be, but you do still have access to past applications that you can take a look through.